Blending in Procreate.
A common mistake people make is just jumping into a full-blown painting when they haven't quite figured out a workflow that works for them. So taking the time to doodle and play around with different brushes and blending modes will help you feel confident when you do go into one of those bigger paintings, and the process is going to go much faster for you.
All right, let's get into blending in Procreate. So I have a little template here that you can download and import into Procreate with me. So to do that, right now I have this template in my photos. So I'm going to import it by going up to the upper left-hand corner here. In the middle, there's this little square with an arrow. We're just going to tap that and send that over to Procreate. So then let's open Procreate up. It's going to be importing, and now we can just go over to our gallery and it's just going to be right here waiting for us. So there are many different ways to blend in Procreate, and here are a couple that I want you to play around with because some people only think that you can blend with the mixing brush. So we're just going to start there. Now with this template, I have some guidelines of where the gradient's going to go, but you don't have to follow. You can stay outside the line. It's just practice. I'm not going to even bother with staying inside the line, so don't worry about it. Let's start with a black. We'll just stay with an airbrush here. Let me get that opacity back up to 100. Start with a slightly bigger brush. And I'm going to put down 3 values. So a black, a mid-tone gray, and then a super light gray. So my 3 values, black, mid-tone gray, and a light gray. So I'm going to go over here to my blending tool, and then to tap it again, you can see which one is selected. We'll just stay with that medium brush here. Sounds good. Let's make sure the size is okay. Perfect. So something I see a lot is some people get really heavy-handed with their mixing and they go in like this, and you just kind of end up with a very muddy mess. And we want to kind of steer away from that unless that's the look we're going for. Sometimes if you want like a wet paint look, maybe for a background, but sometimes it just looks over blended and not purposeful. So we want to avoid that. And to avoid that, we can just use lighter strokes and just a lighter hand. So you can always add a little bit more pressure if you need to. But this way we have control over where that paint is going. Another thing I see students use is way too small of a brush to blend a big area. So it ends up looking, again, messy, muddy, not purposeful. So if you want a smooth blend, you want to make sure you have a bigger brush to cover that area that you are blending. So again, I'm just using a really light hand to blend these areas. Move that paint so I get a nice seamless blend right there. All right, next we have the eyedropper tool. I'm gonna select again, I'm gonna put down that black, mid-tone gray, light gray. Now, the eyedropper tool is a great tool to use because you can select the color in between these two. Now, this method really only works if you're using a brush with a soft edge or a textured edge. If it has a super hard edge, it's not going to work properly. So we're going to take our index finger to bring up the eyedropper tool. We're going to select the color that's in between these 2 values. So we're going to see almost like a darker gray. Select that, and we're just going to lightly apply that color in between these 2. So now we're starting to see a blend happening, and we can repeat that process between this gray and this lighter gray. We're going to select the color right in between these 2 and apply that here. Again, take our index finger, bring up that eyedropper tool and it's going to automatically select that color for us. Just going to lightly put that color down. Perfect. And you can do this as little or as much as you want. Now see, we're getting a harsh line here. I want to bring some of this light gray over. So I'm going to select more of that light gray instead of that dark gray and just kind of bring that over here. Perfect. What's great about the eyedropper tool is that you can use the same brush for an entire painting without switching to a blending tool. So you can just keep eyedropping and using that brush. It's almost like just going back in with this same paintbrush and going in with different colors, which is really, really great. And actually, for me, it works really well to speed up my process. Next, we have brush opacity. So I'm going to zoom in here and select black. Now the opacity is right over here, right under your paintbrush size. And we're just going to bring that opacity down to about 30%. I'm just going to bring that gray over. So already, the way that you use your paintbrushes, you can actually blend on your own with those brushes. So a lot of brushes are pressure sensitive. So if you press really hard, it's going to be really dark. Press really light, it's going to be very light. So already we're getting a blend there. So if that's something that works for you and you want to play around with, that's a great option for blending. So now that we have our first layer, I'm going to go on top of that and layer this color right over what I just did. And we're starting to get a blend here. Now with this method, I'm not getting a super blended look, but that's okay. That could create something really interesting looking. Even using an airbrush, I'm almost getting like a watercolor look, which is really fun. So with different blending methods, you can get different looks and different approaches to things. Like even though I'm trying to keep in the same realm, I am getting different end results, which is really fun. So you can experiment with different ways and think about how you could use each method in different parts of your painting, like the background, or maybe you're using highlights, something like that. Next, we have the selection tool method. So we can go over to our selection tool, which is right up here, this little squiggly line. I'm going to select that and it's going to bring this little menu up for me. I'm going to hit rectangle just because we have a nice little rectangle going. Just going to kind of trace over that shape that's already there. Perfect. Now with this method, you want to go in with a big brush. Everything that is selected is going to show the paint that we apply. All of these little lines here, the paint is not going to go outside. It's almost like taping off your canvas. So let me show you what that looks like. So with this big brush, I can quickly get a really fast, nice blend right there. Done. So look at that. Super fast. A great method for getting color down really quickly. I use this in the very beginning stages of my artwork. I will use the selection tool and just kind of trace over, let's say, a figure or a portrait and just plop down color really, really fast. So that helps me just kind of stay inside the lines and get really big areas of color down quickly. Next, we have layer opacity. So I'm going to create a new layer. And this will be our first layer here. We make that brush a little smaller. And then I'm going to create a layer on top of that. I'm going to put black down. Now with this layer, I'm just going to tap my fingers here. It's going to bring up the opacity option for this entire layer. I'm just going to drag that down till it looks like I'm getting a soft blend right there. And I'm going to repeat that process. Go on top here, add some black, bring that down, add on top. Let's bring in a light gray this time. Let's double tap here, bring that opacity down. And then once I'm happy with what this blend is looking like, I'm going to collapse these layers by swiping all them together. So taking your 2 fingers, swipe, and there we go. So here are some different blending options I really want you to experiment with. Use different brushes for each one. If you want, do a couple different for each one with some texture brushes, air brushes, and you can even play with some of the paint brushes. So if you go to painting and you see all these wet brushes, this is going to do a lot of blending for you. So let's say this is my wet paint brush. We have our wet acrylic. Just going to bring that in. And you can even combine some different blending methods together. So let's say I want to take the eyedropper tool. I'll select maybe one of these lighter grays in here, bring that over. And we're getting some really fun texture look. Make that brush a little bigger. So I don't want you to worry about having the perfect blend. It's really about experimenting and seeing that all the different options that you have and seeing, okay, does this fit into my style? You know, are you going for a more painterly look? So you wouldn't want a super blended look. Maybe you would want something where you're seeing all those brush strokes, or do you want something really airbrush looking? Maybe you want to stick with those types of brushes and get a really seamless one like you're getting with the selection tool. So think about how all of these could apply to your work. Maybe you want to combine a different couple together. That's awesome too. Really, I just want you to take the time to really get comfortable with all of these. See which ones you like, which ones you don't like, and yeah.
Assignment. Complete the practice blending activity provided in the course resources.